Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Synovial Marketing Masterclass. I'm your host, Hannah Lee, and today we have a super exciting guest, Chris Hood. He's done so many amazing things. I'm so excited to get to talk to him today. He is the author of Customer Transformation. He is a business strategist with over 35 years in business development. He's worked for some amazing businesses, worked with amazing businesses, and for amazing businesses. He hosts the Chris Hood Digital Show. He has spearheaded Google's digital strategy, developed storytelling technologies at Fox, and just done so many amazing things. We're going to jump right in because I have so many amazing questions for you today. Thanks for taking the time to be here with us.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I want to start at the beginning and kind of how your story started. It's a very interesting story that you started actually in cinema. I was reading kind of over, and it's a really good story how it all started.
Yeah, well, I often talk about my very first job, which was working at a movie theater, selling popcorn and taking tickets at the front door. But during that time, I was introduced to a lot of really unique and fun opportunities. Some of them were marketing initiatives that we had. Some of them were public relations initiatives. One of the things that I used to do was walk into the auditoriums and stand in front of the audience before the movie started and did trivia questions and handed out movie posters and welcomed them to the movie theater. We wanted to add some sort of personal touch to the experience while they were there. And that was awesome. And course of several years while at the theater, did a whole bunch of things with some great movies. Got to do marketing on films like Jurassic Park and Apollo 13 and many, many others. And then when I left the theater, I started to look at opportunities and think about college. And, I was all over the place.
Mm,
Share the story on a lot of different podcasts about I was presented really with two different options. Should I go into technology or should I go into film? And I figured the obvious choice, since no one really cared about technology at the time, was to movies because that's where all the money was. And later, I realized that there was actually an interesting relationship, a correlation between film and technology. And when the internet came out and websites started to populate across the world, there was a clear need to build entertaining and engaging websites that fulfilled a business, rationale or some sort of problem that people were trying to have. You wanted that experience to be clean and interesting, and there was a convergence. There was a clear understanding in my head that marketing and entertainment and creativity had to directly correlate with technology and business. And ever since then, everything else that I've done, I've kind of looked through that lens of how do we bring these different perspectives together to really understand, one, what the customer wants, and then two, be able to deliver that experience to the customer.
that's great. Yeah, I think a cool part for me when I was reading through everything is that you started, like you said, in cinema and actually in the like marketing the commercials and building like the interactive element to the cinema through the commercials, and then that kind of transformed to interactive like TV technology.
Yeah, when I ultimately ended up at Fox Broadcasting, one of the things that I had the privilege of doing was working on shows like The X Factor and American Idol. Both
Mhm.
were basically performance based shows that required some level of interaction from the audience. And at the time, we were dialing in with our phones to vote for our favorite performer. And I wanted to figure out, well, couldn't we do this digitally? Couldn't we do this electronically? How
Mm.
about, having it in the palm of our hands and being able to not just interact socially with our favorite performers, but also engage with them in real time, during a live performance. So how could you vote, digitally, but also how could you share perspective? How could you vote for something else? You know, we might have a poll that's online saying, what type of music do you want them to sing next week? And then everybody can sit there and in real time vote for that genre, and we could see the results being displayed on the screen. A lot of what you saw during those early days of technology integrating with television, we see all over the place now, right? There's lots
Yes.
of places that are using that kind of interactive TV, because again, we are connected to a device in our hands most of the time. And so, how can we use that as an input device to engage and interact with content that we enjoy? And yeah, I've been doing a lot of that over the course of my career.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's interesting for us as a marketing agency because we are constantly in this day and age, the attention span of our clients and customers when we're creating ad campaigns or content is so small. So I think it's really cool that you were a part of the interactive, like television and that type of technology, because I feel like that was kind of the beginning of keeping the focus of people on television shows and things like that, was them being able to interact and kind of have a part in the show. So I think that's really interesting. I wanted to kind of touch on, you also had a role in the music industry, so it kind of went from cinema to like the music industry, and you were like one of the beginning players in that too, with starting with like the cloud technology and all of that. So how did you kind of transform from, we started in cinema to now we went over to music and that kind of technology and innovation?
Yeah. I've had the privilege of being what we'll say in the media and entertainment industry for 30 plus years. And that has spanned television and film and music and video games. And the way I look at it is it's all forms of entertainment. It's all really the same. We just have to look at it in terms of what's the channel or mechanism by which we're being entertained, whether that again is through the television or through a film screen, or whether it's through our ears and listening to music. If
Mm,
even podcasting, right, is a form of entertainment, maybe education, but it's all part of that broader media and entertainment. And also, when I look at marketing, and this is going to be probably controversial for a lot of people who are listening. Anybody out there who has a job opening for a marketing expert and it says required 10 or X years of experience specifically in an industry has no idea what they're talking about, because
mm,
marketing in general is a skill set that transcends all industries. If you
100%.
apply the basic premise of marketing, you can do it no matter what the product is and no matter what the industry is. And I would even challenge people that if you're looking for somebody to help you market, say, healthcare or market financial, go find somebody who has done marketing in entertainment, because they tend to know what they're doing more than the people in healthcare or financial, right?
Mm,
And it's going to give you a fresh perspective. It's going to give
mm,
you insights on how to do these things differently. So, marketing is a skill. It does not matter the industry. But to the question in terms of what I did during those early days of music, yeah, it was another really exciting product. It was about developing music services in cloud, which at the time there was no such thing as cloud. And then
mhm,
how do we offer that specifically to college students, which we knew at the time was a demographic that was really into music, downloading music. There was a lot of problems on college campuses with uh, pro- music piracy. I can get it out today. It's early here. Um,
yeah.
and so, how do you solve a lot of these problems, right? And again, marketing and even business strategy is
Mhm,
often around what is the problem you are solving, and then how can you solve that with words so that people will gain interest and want to explore it. And for us, one of the primary examples of this was, and again, this is probably before a lot of people realize, if you had a playlist and you created a playlist, say on your iPod, because we didn't have iPhones, if you
Back in the
created
day.
a playlist on one device, you would have to go and replicate that playlist on another device, like on your computer or on your phone, two different devices, literally two different playlists,
Mm.
because we didn't have mechanisms by which we could synchronize those playlists across multiple devices like we do today. So we created the concept of how do we basically synchronize those playlists and get your music, the same music across any device that you have in your hand or on your laptop or computer. And little did we know at that time that that was basically the introduction of the cloud premise.
Wow. That is so cool. Yeah. So with that, with two of these different, with the cinema and with the music industry, have you always been, I feel like I already know the answer, but have you always been an innovator type? Just always thinking of these kind of out of the box ideas, or how did that, like your love for innovation and out of the box ideas, was that always there?
Yeah. It has been. I can't really tell you where it came from, but what I can say is that it is about this is challenging, I think, for a lot of people because they want to jump to the business. They want to jump to the solution and they don't spend time listening to what the problem is or
Mm,
even listening at all to what people are thinking about or challenged with. And in an example at the movie theater, I came up with an innovative idea of developing on screen advertisement. Now, if you've ever been to the movies, you've always seen video displays up on the screen, and usually those are synchronized or some sort of loop that has entertainment, and sometimes they'll have trivia. And at the time when I was at the movie theaters, they were actually slides, little 35 millimeter slides that were in a carousel, and those carousels would go around in a circle, and it was about a 30-minute carousel. Well, if you came to the theater early and you sat there watching the slides, at some point in time you would get 1.5 rotations of the carousel of slides. And so for trivia questions, as an example, you would often see the same trivia questions appear. And if you were a regular and you came to the movies, let's say every Friday, well, those carousels never changed. Those carousels changed about once every 30 days, once a month. So if
mm,
you came often, you would see all of the same questions and all the same advertisements continuously rotating over the course of 30 days. And I mentioned I would go in and I would sit down and talk with people at the theater before their movie started. And as I was going up and down the aisles and just having general conversation, the slides were going and people were saying, "Oh, I know this one. I've seen it before." And they would say, "Can't we get new slides? Can't we get new trivia questions?"
yeah.
And I asked the simple question at that time, well, could we have a mechanism by which we randomize those questions? Those trivia questions should be unlimited. How about if we had 100 and every time you went, they were different? You would never have the same question, right?
Mm,
And it was all because I sat there and listened. I thought about the opportunity. I realized that there was technology out there already that could solve this. And so I began to develop it. But it started because there was a clear problem and there was a clear validation of that problem by a customer, which then led me to thinking about how do I solve that? And once again, I think a lot of people who try to innovate are jumping ahead. Like, how do I make money? Even if we look at the Uber example, Uber didn't just, hey,
mm,
how about if we do this? They had the problems themselves. They talked to people in line for taxis who complained and expressed the exact same problem. They recognized that there was challenges, and then they began to try to figure out how to innovate some new idea that could solve that problem. And if you do it in that order where you first listen, you ask the right questions, you talk to people, you validate the problem, then you can come up with the solution to that problem. And then you can create a business around that. If you follow that path, then it becomes a little easier for us to innovate. But again, I think a lot of people want to just jump to let's build some new technology and I've got a great idea. And they miss the purpose of the solution you're solving.
100%. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And there's so many I talked about this I think with a previous guest, but we were talking about like trying to recreate the wheel, and some people want to like they have this crazy idea and they're not listening to the actual pain point and the actual problems. They just come up with something and they're like, "Oh, I'm just going to do this," but it has no strategy or need behind it, and then the business fails and they feel like, oh, I had a failure, but they didn't really address a pain point. There wasn't a market for their idea. There can be great ideas and they can go off with this idea, but if there's no market behind it that people actually it solves a pain point or people need it, it's going to fail. And with that, I kind of wanted to talk about a lot of people don't jump on business ideas or go through maybe with these big ideas that they have because they're afraid of failure. So I know probably in your journey, it hasn't been an easy road. I'm sure there's been lots of failures or failed ideas. So what would you say to people that are like, I have this idea, there's definitely a pain point that I think it would solve, but I'm afraid that, it's too big of a process or I'm going to fail?
Yeah, well, you can a few things in there. First, I would say continue to validate the idea, right? Because I think a lot of people say I have an idea and it's a pain point and it will solve. And I'll give you an example of how this could become biased to you. If you have the problem, that's great. That doesn't mean that everybody else has the problem. So that's the first checkpoint. Like,
Mm-hmm.
make sure it's not just you. Second point is make sure it's just not your parents. you know, just make sure
Yeah.
it's not your significant other, because a lot of times I'll go down and I'll talk to my mom and I'll say, I've got this great idea. Well, what do you think the first thing my mom says is, yeah, that sounds like a great
Yeah.
idea.
Great
Well,
idea.
I've
Yeah.
validated that I'm on the right track, right? So move outside of your circle, try to continue to validate it with more than just your inner circle. You've got to actually get real unbiased opinions and try to challenge yourself there to stretch beyond just a couple of people. That's validation. When you can get 100 people to validate that you have a right idea, then you're on to something. The second thing is that you can do this in iterations. You can start small. Anything big doesn't start big. Anything big can start with a simple concept, right? You can do a prototype, you can do a proof of concept, you can draw it out on a piece of paper. You can write a story around it. You can develop a video around it. You can take your phone and shoot a YouTube short for it, right? There's any number of things that you can do to begin to explore the idea in a concept, conceptually actually build it. And then you can get more validation. And so there's this repetitive motion you go through. Build something, validate, improve it, validate, iterate on it, validate. And if you can get into that mindset, then it becomes a little easier to build something big. Now, granted, there's always going to be something that's going to cost a lot of money. There's going to be expenses and cost to things. There's going to be marketing effort. There's going to be all these things that you're going to be intimidated by. And you've got to take that step back and realize that, okay, how do I do this slowly? Another thing I think a lot of people struggle with is, well, I'm just going to go find funding. I'm going to find somebody who's going to give me the money to build this thing. Well, I'll
Mhm.
tell you right now, most of them are going to say, well, what have you already built? And if you don't
Mhm.
have anything, if you don't even have, say, a website that has a clear interest list, that has people who are expressing that this is something that they would be interested in, that it does solve the problem that we've already outlined, that we have validated that. If you can start to show that, and I'm telling you, you can do that for free, then you're not going to get the investors. You're not going to get anybody who's interested because they want to see traction. They want to see that, yeah, you've got an idea, that you are motivated to do it yourself, and that you do have individuals who have expressed interest in that. And so, again, you've got to start small. You've got to iterate on those ideas. You've got to build it slowly. And there is no such thing as, well, if I don't build it fast enough, then I'm going to have somebody else who's going to do it. That might be the case in large organizations. If you've never watched Shark Tank or,
Mhm.
any of the European, similar types of shows, they all have a basic premise. Like somebody who comes in and says, well, I've got a new idea for a shoe. There are thousands of shoe companies out there that can build a new shoe product in a day, and they are already solving problems. So if
Mhm.
you're trying to compete with a larger type of product, shoes, healthcare, right? I would, if your passion is there, go do it. But understand that that is going to be a little bit more challenging. If you've got some new invention that you want to build that is going to help, say, mothers that are at home and and have kids and a pet, and you got some new dog thing, like great, like go solve that problem and then start to iterate on it. But you've got to be very careful about what you're trying to tackle, and also justify that yeah, you can actually, the David versus Goliath scenario is challenging, and I would argue that that might not be the best approach. If you feel like, hey, this is too big, that's one question you should explore as well.
Yeah, I agree completely. And there's a lot of data I think that has to be collected, and a lot of like it's a longer process than most people just think that they can jump into business and they have a problem, they feel like they're validated in the problem, they jump in the business and they're surprised at all of the work that actually goes into collecting the data and building the prototypes and going through the process. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And talking about the technology and innovation, I know a hot topic right now, especially for us in the marketing world, is the AI, all of the AI technology. So I definitely wanted to touch on your opinions on that. How do you feel like it's changing the game, changing the digital space? What's kind of going on with that?
Yeah, AI is AI is having a huge impact on a lot of us, and AI is definitely helping in areas like marketing.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that there is a misunderstanding of what AI is, and a new reliance. You can call it, they're jumping on the bandwagon, or you're following the next new shiny object. AI is not your answer to solve all your problems.
Yes.
AI is not going to all of a sudden instantly help you attract new customers. If
Mhm.
you have a struggling product, AI is not going to magically grant you new customers. And you're not going to be able to use AI to develop some amazing new marketing plan that is going to also make you successful overnight. It's just not going to happen,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, if you don't have a product or service that solves a problem to a consumer, as we've been talking about, no amount of AI and no amount of marketing and no amount of advertising is going to solve that, right? And oh, by the way, if you're thinking about SEO and you want to get to the top of the list of SEO, AI is probably your worst enemy. It's not going to
Yes.
help you magically get to the top of the list overnight. SEO and getting to the top of the list is years of development, not months of development, and
Yes,
definitely
please
not days of
please
development.
remind them of that. If I could tell you how many times we hear, "Get me to the top of Google, get me to the top of," like, it's so SEO is so much, and we hear that so much from clients that it's just keywords and we're just gonna get to the top of Google and the top of
Yeah,
search engines. It's like, yeah.
yeah. I will give you a strong, solid example of this. Me personally, my own website, my own brand, and I know what I'm doing, I'll say. uh, I've had my website for 20 years plus. And up until last year, I was still not number one if you did a search result for Chris Hood, like very
Mm.
basic. ChrisHood.com, Chris Hood key terms, do a search for Chris Hood. I should appear at the top, right? And now I will say that over the course of, say, the last 10 years, I've spent some effort in doing it and not some effort. But over the course of the last year, I spent a lot of effort, primarily focused on SEO and keyword generation and optimization and making sure that it all worked. And last year, I was number two, number three. Like I just could not hit that number one spot. As of about this month, I hit number one. So it took me literally a year of trying to actually get to the top spot. So anybody who thinks that they can do it overnight, you cannot. And AI cannot help you do it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, if I could tell you how many times we have had people just think that SEO, they're kind of like stuck in this SEO, like they think that is like the utmost importance. And SEO is very important. And your website is super important and the design. And we go over all of these strategies. But to get your website at the top of Google and to magically just be ranked number one is not a thing. So I'm
We'll
glad
also
I'm
add
glad you
that
touched on that.
Yeah, we'll also add that look, SEO, all that's doing, let's say you are number one and you're on the top of the list and you achieved it. Congratulations. That still doesn't
Yeah.
sell products. All that's
Yes.
giving you is more traffic to your site as leads to potentially sell, right? So
Yes.
increased traffic means potentially more sales. But if you don't have a product that people want, doesn't matter what the traffic is to your site. So I would still argue go back and focus on validating your product and services and then start thinking about okay, how are we going to get more people to the website and then how are we going to generate a funnel to, convert that.
100%. Yes. Yeah. I completely agree. And I wanted to touch on your book. I'm super interested in that. Where did the customer transformation, that kind of aspect, how did where did that start? And kind of tell us a little bit more about your book.
Yeah, so I had this idea of customer transformation probably back in 2014. And what I saw was the term digital transformation became this almighty conversation. And I can't tell you, everywhere I look, someone was writing about digital transformation and somebody was writing about, this is the reason for you to digitally transform. And even from a marketing perspective, they're like, just fill in the place, man, fill in the blank. I'm really
Yes.
on top of it today. For example, you might say something like, uh, all great pet walkers start with digital transformation. Like, what? What? Like, I mean, these became marketing slogans because they realized that everybody thought, well, yeah, if I just got, it's like AI. If I just did this, then I would magically be able to attract customers or digitally transform. And but what, but what started to happen was people began to lose focus of what digital transformation was really
Mm.
intended for. Digital transformation, the official real definition of this, is the recognition that you have to change your technology in order to keep up with the demands of your consumers. And yet, everybody wanted to focus on the technology and forget about the consumers. You don't just transform your technology for the sake of transforming your technology. We go back to artificial intelligence, and it's the same thing. You don't just bring in artificial intelligence because you want to bring in artificial intelligence. Ask the questions. Do my customers want artificial intelligence? Do they even care about artificial intelligence? What are we going to do with it that meets the consumer's needs? And so, as you start to focus on the technology, you lose focus on your customers. And so I started playing around with the concept of let's stop placing the emphasis on digital and let's start placing the emphasis on customer transformation. So around 2014, I began to map out what that might look like. It's an understanding that your customers are your priorities. Your customers are the ones that are transforming first. And then it's the technology that you have to adapt to keep up with that customer transformation. And we've seen this throughout history. For example, your customers started to buy iPhones, and all of a sudden they had access to your websites and applications. And then all of a sudden, we needed an app for that. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you needed an app for that because your customers were demanding to engage with you through an app.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't go and say, let's build an app and hope we get customers,
Yes.
right? The customers always come first.
Mm.
And so what's interesting is if we compare this again against AI, you're bringing in the AI and thinking, now what are we going to do with this for our customers? As opposed to starting with the customers are demanding it. They're not.
Mm-mm.
They are not demanding it. In fact, customers have been using AI in applications for over 10 years. Every time you go to Starbucks, you are using AI whether you realize it or not. You've been
Mm-hmm.
using AI in your Starbucks apps and other apps. Netflix uses AI. There's Amazon uses AI. All of
Yeah.
them have been using AI before you even realized it was a terminology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to continue to think about this customer first perspective. And so as I started to map out what that customer transformation looked like, I wrote a book on it, and the book breaks it down into 7 stages. And the 7 stages basically take you from the customer first all the way into the business last.
Mm.
And actually, technology is the sixth of the seventh stage because you've got to get through a whole bunch of other things before you even start thinking about the technology.
Yeah.
And again, I think it just shifts the focus for a lot of organizations so that they reset and they get into the mindset of, okay, customers first. And then if you go through this path, realizing that your customers are transforming and your customers are demanding new ways of engaging with you, then you can start to figure out, well, how do I solve that? How do I build for that? And what is the technology that's going to support that?
100%. Yeah, we talk so much about ideal client, and there's so many businesses that are so, there's so many businesses that we see that come to us and our agency, and they're like, oh, we're selling to everyone, and they don't have like this ideal client. And so sitting down with them and going through that process of like diving really deep into that and getting the data and like moving through those steps before going into the digital. Everyone wants to jump on social media, everyone wants to build their website, everyone wants to do all of that, but there's so much of that beginning like customer research and market research and all of that that comes first, that we have to kind of handle first, that nobody really wants to do. It's not the fun part that everyone's so enthused about. So I'm definitely glad that you touched on that because it is so true that all the social media and websites and digital is also pretty and fun, but there's so much of the data and kind of the back work that has to go into that. So I definitely think that's really important. I'm excited for everyone to get a hold of your book and kind of walk through that process to kind of show them that the digital beautiful stuff comes at the end. It's necessary, but for businesses, I kind of wanted to touch on that too. Do you think in today's age, I mean, clearly in today's age, we are a digital age. So businesses trying to survive, it is important for them we still have some clients that are out here like trying to stay out of the digital age, trying to stay away from all of that. What is your kind of viewpoint on, as a business, getting into the digital world and the importance of that?
Yeah. So a few things in there. And I do want to take one quick step back and think about it. I think because of the digital age, there's a lot of people who have an idea for technology. And so as I say, well, you've got to figure out your customer and your technology last, they're thinking, well, wait a second, I'm a technology company. I've got to build the technology. So we've got to start there.
Mhm.
No, you still have to sell it. You still have to, you still have a customer, right? But that's one of the things that I often get pushback on is, well, we're a tech company, we're a digital company, so we're building the technology, we're building technology. We have to know what the technology is. But the argument still is going to go back. If you don't have a customer, you don't have a business.
Mm,
You're not actually able to sell whatever technology you build. So you still have to start with that core foundation and research of what that is that you're solving for. As far as digital, now I recognize that there's probably several companies out there in the world, especially some of the more rural types of countries and areas that we could say, look, they probably don't have technology, right? There's farmers, as an example, that probably don't have access to or use technology.
mhm.
Excuse me.
You're fine.
Man, I'm going to just say it's an early morning. But that's okay. I'm
Yeah.
having fun. So there's definitely going to be organizations, independents, entrepreneurs, rural businesses that are not engaged with technology. But at the end of the day, if we really are to try to think about this, most businesses are already a digital company. They're already dependent upon and relying on technology. And the basic example of this would be if you're using electricity, you're probably using technology. Even if you've got a tractor and you're using gas, you could argue that that's a form of technology. There's irrigation systems now that are a little bit more digital. But look, basic electricity, basic electronics, all of that is going to start to introduce you into what we call the digital age. Even if you're using email, that is digital technology. If you are communicating with your customers in some way, and maybe it's just a phone, you're starting to get a little bit more into digital, right? So it becomes increasingly hard to do business without digital technologies of some form. And I would argue that people who are debating, like, well, what does this really mean? What do I have to do? What's the starting point? First, start to think about the ways that you are engaging with your product or with your customers. And there's probably some level of technology there. Even if you're thinking about marketing,
Mhm.
social media begins to be introduced, right? Um, so it's very hard for me to find businesses that are probably not somewhere on that introductory level. When we talk about becoming a digital business, we're not saying like transform everything you do into digital technologies so that you can use that. We're talking about everything from, again, email, social media, Google search terms, a website, maybe an app. As we start to advance, maybe you're using some form of Internet of Things device within your products. Maybe you have a connection, Wi-Fi signals to get information. If you're looking at the news and television on a regular basis, like as you start to progress down that track, you're in a digital age. Even data, if you're capturing data, I don't know too many people, and again, I'm sure they're out there, who are keeping paper records of what's happening. Like if you're literally on paper and you're saying, well, I sold 2 widgets today, and that
Yeah.
cost, like if you're doing that
Mhm.
on paper and you're conducting all of your business affairs on in books, literal books, um, yeah, then maybe you don't have data. But the tools that are out there, even a basic laptop with an Excel spreadsheet to track, performance, you're digital. That's a digital product. How far you expand on that and how much further you get down that digital, track, there's various levels. But I wouldn't suggest that you be fearful of it. I think there's clearly things that you can do to help you expedite, to speed up your processes, to automate those processes, to make it easier on your life. And two, we go back to the customer. At some point in time, your customers are going to be demanding, do you have this in a digital format? Do you have this in a way that I can connect with you?
Mhm.
They want to do it. And so you're going to have to provide it to them. And that's that process of customer transformation.
I love that. Yeah, I love that it is so customer focused because I feel like we talk a lot about that if you can have a great product, a great business, but again, if there's no customers, if nobody knows it exists, you're not going to have any sales and therefore you don't have a business. So making sure that you are really focusing on the customer, catering to the customer and what they're asking for, I think is so great that you talk about. So this has been so informative. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with us. Where can everyone find you and connect with you? I know I want to push them to get your book because I'm going to go through the book. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, well, I already kind of pitched it, but you can just visit my website, chrishood.com, CHRISHOOD.com. And on there, you can find my book, you can find my blog and my podcast and my social media profile. So anything that you need, it's right there and happy to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. It has been another amazing episode, and definitely connect with Chris and check him out.